Okay, we are back again today, and today we're going to speak, I guess, on a different topic. Uh, I was speaking to some folks last night, and I don't know how I got brought up, but the talking about vampires. Okay, um, just say what I know about it, what I've heard all my life, being raised here. Uh, New Orleans is known as a hotbed for vampires. Um, Back in the French colonial days, uh, when the French started coming into the South, into Louisiana, to New Orleans, they brought that term from France. Now, I don't know if it was the term vampire or Nosferatu. There's another name, Stegoi. I think Stegoi is more or less like for Poland, Yugoslavia, Romania, Russia, places like that. So, anyway, whatever term they used. And in the 1800s, there was a man come to New Orleans from France. He could speak, I think they said, six languages. His name was Jacques Saint Germain, and he would go to all these fancy balls and parties in New Orleans with the socialites because he had money, and he would never partake in food, and he always sipped on a glass of red wine, and nobody really thought, just thought that he was eccentric. Uh, a young lady had went up on the balcony of the home with him, and he was speaking. And as the story goes, he was kissing her neck and stuff. And he tried to bite her neck, and she screamed and took about 4 or 5 steps away from him. And other people heard screaming, went up there and checked. And Saint Germain played it off as, you know, I tried to kiss a young lady's neck. I guess I was too inappropriate. I apologize. So, okay. But then stranger things started happening. Uh, a young man went to be his servant or was going to catalog his library of all the books he had. And they saw him for about 8 months, you know, in and around the house, going to the groceries store to pick up things for the house, getting bottles of wine, and then disappeared. Nothing. Uh, Nobody really concerned about it because, as Saint Germain said, he'd hired him to record his books and get his library straight. So everybody figured he did that and he just went about his business. Well, a while after that, some way, shape, or form, I think it was smoke coming out one of the bottom floors of the house. The house wasn't on fire itself, but it had a small fire with smoke coming out of it. So the police and fire department got there. Saint Germain wasn't there at the time. Uh, Got in the house, put the little fire out, but they also started smelling a different odor. Because here in Louisiana and New Orleans, but maybe not all Louisiana, we can't have basements here because of our water table. Now you can build your house up on brick, a foundation or cinder blocks, and then put your main house, your main floor, and start going up. Uh, and it's not really a basement; it's just a ground floor. But and they found a young man's partially decomposed body. And when they did the autopsy, the doctor said all his blood had been removed. So they started looking for Saint Germain. And as the investigation went on, they still hadn't found him, but they was getting uh, feedback from other communities leading up to New Orleans that about the same thing happened. I think in Gulfport or Biloxi, Mississippi, was his last stop before he came and called New Orleans his home. Uh, they had like 4 or 5 different disappearances, and sure enough, they found the bodies in a home that Saint Germain owned in Gulfport. But that wasn't his main house. So it was like a second house. So his main house was, the bodies wasn't in his main house. And same thing again, all the blood had been removed from their bodies. So that's one of the stories. Nobody ever knows what happened to Jacques Saint Germain. Then the other one is the French girls coming from France, because all the young plantation owners uh, wanted brides, and so they made a deal with the king of France, and he handpicked some select families, young ladies that could come to Louisiana, to New Orleans, and marry these young men. And it was they would get to New Orleans and they would go to the Ursuline convent. Their clothes and all that would be in wooden boxes that was almost shaped like a casket, and they got the name Casket Girls. And they also thought that that's how other vampires was introduced in New Orleans, through the Casket Girls, when they came in and went to the Ursuline convent. Now, just having said that, that kind of blows a lot of theories that vampires can't be on holy ground, things like that. And I'm quite sure, well, I am quite sure, Ursuline convent is no longer open, but at the same time, it's a convent. We have statues of Jesus, saints, crosses, things like that all over. So it kind of blows a hole in that theory about evil and good, but a vampire can't go into church. So that may just be folklore of that. Don't know, never met one, never seen one. Heard about it. Heard about a couple of cases. Uh, and then there was the case of, I can't remember the dude's name, but they didn't really find out his name to the end. Uh, I think 8 or 9 people was found dead in New Orleans and had all the blood drained. And the Catholic priest in that area became very concerned about not just a murderer, but it was more than that. And he seeked out information he could about the undead and vampires, and got a name of a voodoo priest to go talk to. And he did. And he told the voodoo priest his plans of tracking this man down, and either one, bring him to justice for the murders, or two, bring him to justice for the murders and find out if he's a vampire and stake him dead. So the voodoo priest agreed. They started searching for the man. The best thing they could do was follow the railroad, because there was only like two means of transportation back in the day: the railroad or riverboats. So they started tracking the railroad, and sure enough, they would get in 3 or 4 communities over and find out the same thing from the locals. One, two, three people had been found dead. They said they had puncture wounds, that the blood had been drained out of them. So they went further down in the community. Sure enough, about 3, 4 communities over, it was the same story. Not a lot of people, 3 or 4, but it was a pattern. They finally caught up to this man at a railroad junction that they were preparing. So undoubtedly, uh, I don't, maybe he had to work for a living. Uh, but anyway, that's where they found him. And he had 3 or 4 people that was always mingling with him. And they was disheveled, dirty. Some had blood-looking stains on their clothes. And the voodoo priest and the Catholic priest started to heavily question them about this person. And one finally broke and said where he lived in the swamps. And they went out and found his house in the swamp, found him sitting on the porch of the swamp on a swing, but very weak, couldn't even move. The story goes that both the voodoo priest and the Catholic priest realized he is Nosferatu. He's the undead. He's a vampire. Undoubtedly, he hadn't fed in a few days, and he was getting weaker and weaker at the time. So I don't even think, I never heard the story being told that they questioned him at all. They based their answer on the visual of what he looked like. So the Catholic priest ran a stake through his heart. The voodoo priest cut his head off, and the Catholic priest laid him to rest in consecrated soil to see if it releases his spirit. Now, today at the New Orleans Vampire Museum, if you ever get a chance to come here, I suggest that's one place you go, and the Voodoo Museum. But at the Vampire Museum, I've seen the box and stuff like that. It's supposed to be the heart of that certain individual that they cut out from him after they staked him, cut his head off, and the wooden stake that was used to impale his heart. Now here's an old wooden box in there with some hay-looking stuff, and it's a life size of a human heart. You know, they don't let you touch anything. Uh, that was supposed to be that person's heart that they cut out, and they put the stake by it. I guess the Catholic priest or the voodoo priest kept it for safety, and then decided to turn it over to somebody else. So that's another one of the stories. I know of two um, in New Orleans, and I wasn't there to witness it. It was word of mouth, but there was three young ladies one night on a girls' night out, and they was walking through the French Quarter, going to the different jazz clubs, and one of them, they came up by Ursuline Convent and the Cathedral at Jackson Square. It was at the Cathedral at Jackson Square, actually not Ursuline Convent. And they would stop talking and stuff like that, trying to figure out which club they was going to go to next. And one of the girls looked up and said, "Look at that! Look at at the steeple." And as you know, big churches got the steeples, and then they got a wooden door that'll open up, I guess, for ventilation and cleaning. Uh, the steeple door was open, and a light was on, and they could see the outline of a man standing at the door. And they all prepared to witness a suicide. And as the report goes, the figure jumped out the window, dropped about 5, 6 feet, and then flew off. Uh, the units were called, and at the beginning, everybody thought it was alcohol. And I mean, 'cause they wasn't slap happy drunk. They just had a couple of drinks. You know, they just got started on their little jazz cruise, and it was probably going to be left at that, because I know they was talking of citing them for filing a false police report. But what slowed all that down was, one, they got the priest of the church to open the church up, go up into the steeple bell towers, and they had a light on in there, small light, and the door was open. And the priest told them, "No, we don't even open these doors no more." Uh, so that was one thing that corroborated what they were seeing. I mean, hell, when the units got there, they could see the light on, the steeple door open at the top. But what surprisingly happened was one of the girls was so upset, so shaken, they actually had to send her to Charity Hospital because she was going into shock. And most people, when they, are just making things up or think what they saw, don't go into shock. So they had to get her to Charity Hospital, because she was going into shock. So I kind of lifted a couple of eyebrows. They wrote it up, turned it in. Uh, and as far as I know, that was the end of that. They searched around the quarter and stuff. They didn't have a description. It was just an outline of a man. And the next story is, there's a five-star hotel on Porter Street. I'm not going to mention the name. Uh, they had a man come into the city and rented a hotel room out I think, for a week. And he told him at the front desk, that he was writing, he was a journalist and he was writing an article about vampires in New Orleans. Because he said he went to New York, hearing the vampire stories there, Chicago, Vegas, didn't realize Vegas had vampires, and then came to New Orleans. And the people at the hotel said, well, look, that's rich in our history. But if you want, somebody to maybe give you some correct answers, they also explained to him to go to the Voodoo Museum or the Vampire Museum. So I guess he did that. But on the fourth night, he had met up with some younger people. I think it was 3 boys and 2 girls, and or six people altogether. And older, they said at the hotel, well distinguished man that was with the group, plus the man that was doing the research. So 7 walked into the hotel, got on the elevator, went up to his room. The next morning, he had the do not disturb tag on his door. So house cleaning went about their business till later. That afternoon, it was still there, so he told the manager about it. The manager called the room, no answer, knocked on the door, no answer, opened the door up, and found a man in his bathtub had been skinned to death. They removed all his skin. So NOPD was called, the units got there, and they started looking at the security cameras of, the night before. And walking through the door was a distinguished man, the man that had the room, 2 boys and a girl. Yeah, it was 5 or 6. It was 5 or 6. But the security camera was one person minus the distinguished gentleman. They went up to the hotel room. The hotel staff didn't pay attention to how long it was up there. Had no noise, no disturbances. Held 2 adjoining rooms. The police questioned them. They said they heard nothing throughout the night. And the coroner took the body. Homicide came in. And in the room, as I was told, was a small crystal goblet. And it looked like some blood had been in there. And somebody had tasted it because it left a line, like when you drink something, it leaves a line. So they brought that in. They did a DNA test. The blood matched the victim. So I think it was like 2 hours before they seen the people come out the elevator. The elevator door opened up. The man that had the room didn't get off the elevator. The distinguished gentleman didn't get off the elevator. And the other ones got off the elevator. The 2 men and the 1 girl. And they said on the tape, it looked like one of them had put their hand to hold the elevator door open and was like talking to somebody, but wasn't showing up on the security scan on the screen. And the hotel staff was adamant. They saw the distinguished man get out the elevator, saw him walk through the lobby with the younger people, walked out the door, but the closed circuit cameras didn't pick him up at all. So about a month later, through the investigations, they found, and with the help of the security camera, they found who the young people were and brought them in, questioned them, and actually arrested them for the crime because they didn't say they didn't do it. Matter of fact, they almost rebelled about skinning him alive. I think one of them said he was interested in vampires. We showed him the dark side of New Orleans. So, as far as I know, they're all still in prison. I think they all got life terms. Uh, but the strange thing about it is that distinguished gentleman that the hotel staff seen walk through the door, get on the elevator. Uh, 2.5 hours later, whatever the time frame was, elevator opened up. Seen a distinguished man get out the elevator and walk out the door. Uh, the only one was missing from the hotel staff was the man that had the room. But the cameras didn't pick up that so-called distinguished man. And come to find out during the autopsy, the man that was killed, the victim, was in first stage leukemia. So, yeah, you're going to talk about that, those kind of cases when in your district and shit is weird. Some things that you've seen and things that you heard. So, the consensus was that they poured a small amount to that crystal glass goblet, the little crystal glass goblet, and the distinguished gentleman, or if you want to say the vampire, the undead, sipped it and realized the man was sick. Now, that's one of the rules that's supposed to be about vampires. They can't partake on contaminated blood. They cannot drink from the blood of another vampire or something dead. That will kill them outright, like throwing them into the bright sunlight. Uh, they're supposed to not be able to cross over free running water. Uh, Now, let's face it, all is just put together over hundreds of years. I even heard that silver will stop it. I always known silver was supposed to stop werewolves. Um, so I guess. But the young people admitted to killing him. They never solved the case. Um, Fast forward about 10 years, we had a missing person. Uh, Man went missing after leaving his office building, and the family filed a missing persons report. And it was like 2 weeks later, they were searching inside of an abandoned warehouse and found his body laying in the corner of the warehouse. There was no blood around him, no splatter marks, no sign of a struggle. He started decomposing, so that they couldn't really distinguish what was going on. And the homicide detectives came in. The coroner took the body, and I was told through a person that actually sat down and spoke with the not the lead detective, but one of the homicide detectives I was working on the case, and they said that on his shoulder was two large bite marks, and it went down so far. I think the coroner said it nicked or scratched on his shoulder bones. Uh, the murder didn't take place there. The body was dumped there, but that wasn't the place where the murder took place. Hence, because there was no blood, no sign of a struggle, no nothing. It was done someplace else, and the body was dropped there. So when people start talking about vampires, and New Orleans always come up, they got YouTube videos about vampires in New Orleans. I think maybe every metropolitan city has legends of vampires, but New Orleans is supposed to be more prominent with it. Uh, that's just a few of the stories. There's one that came up, a young lady and one of her male friends was going to go to Frenchman Avenue and listen to some jazz music. Now, Frenchman Avenue for New Orleans is like, for New Orleans people, is like uh, Bourbon Street, but it's for the locals, not, let's face it, Bourbon Street is for tourists. Okay, and you're born and raised around here. Your parents or your grandparents will tell you you're born and raised around here at night. There's no reason for you to be on Bourbon Street. That's for tourists. So they called a taxi. Taxi came up and drove to Frenchman Avenue. The young lady and her friend was inside having a beer, listening to the jazz music, and she excused herself to go smoke a cigarette. So the little guy, on the side, smoke a cigarette, cool. they wasn't in a relationship or nothing like that. They was just platonical friends. And he noticed after a while she'd been gone. So he tried texting her, calling her cell phone, no answer. Uh, Instead of getting up, going outside, check for her, he just, she'll come back in. And the young lady's story is she was outside smoking a cigarette, and all of a sudden she heard footsteps just come out of nowhere. And she said it wasn't like tennis shoes with rubber soles or dress shoes that had rubber soles. She said it sounded like the old-fashioned shoes that had wooden soles with the rubber covering on top of the old shoes. And she could hear that. She spun around, and there was a man standing face to face with her. He'd already got close to her, and she said she felt that she wasn't in control of herself. She almost felt paralyzed looking into his eyes, and he only said hello to her, and I guess put her in the vampire gaze, and he bent over to bite her neck, and whatever it was, I guess maybe a fang hit or something, it broke that spell. She screamed, turned around, started running, turned around and looked. The man was gone. The only thing was there left of the man. He was walking also with umbrella. The umbrella leaned against the building. So stories abound around here with the supernatural. Vampires in the swamps. They got the Rougarou, the werewolf. That's prevalent among the people in the swamps, the shamans and the locals, uh, especially around Terrebonne Parish and stuff like that, with the local Indian population. And to be cursed with that is said that you had to do a grievance thing against a family member or to the community, and then the shaman would lay a curse on you. Now, as the story goes, you would turn completely into a Rougarou, a werewolf, um, standing 7 feet tall and big, muscular, and on bipedal on both legs. But they retained their human mind, because if you're being punished for doing something egregious against your community, um, I would imagine the last thing you want to do is, as a punishment, turn him into that and then take his mind away, because then we'll stop him from just savagely ripping everything apart. But it wasn't all the time. It was like they would go through this, and the next day they'd find themselves and work back, on the shrimp boats and stuff like that, or whatever they did in the community, and then go missing for another night and a half a day or something like that. Because when the spell activated again, they knew they had to get away from people. But like I said, as the story goes, they would keep their human thoughts. And the only way that the spell could be broken was by a family member taking a knife and putting a cut on you. Once your blood began to spill, so did the curse. And it was pretty obvious after that. There was a story in Terrebonne Parish about a young man, and nobody suspected anything, except he'd just wander off at night, but then he'd show back up at his shrimp boat the next day, uh, after the other shrimp boats had left. But they just said it looked like he had been drunk all night long, you know. So that they figured he was just a raging alcoholic. They couldn't figure out why he went out in the swamps and did it, but whatever. And he went back into the community and went to his brother's residence. Now, his brother and his wife was going to a function at the community center, leaving his 16, 15-year-old son and a 10-year-old daughter. And as the story goes, the young boy asked the parents if he could have coffee while he was gone. And here in the South and back in, yeah, as a young boy growing up at a certain age, yeah, you can have coffee. You can have coffee. Now, under that age, no, it's like, you know, giving you a shot of whiskey. So he was so happy that they said, got his little sister put off to bed, seeing his mom and his daddy stand at the stove, cook coffee so many times, he knew it with his eyes closed. So he fixed his coffee, sat down at the dinner table with his cup of coffee, happy as all hell that he was, old enough now to drink coffee. And the door began to forcibly rattle, like something was trying to get in, and scared the hell out of him. And he had enough time to get up from the kitchen table. His little sister jumped out of bed. He told her to go hide underneath the bed. He grabbed a big butcher's knife. The door slung open, and there was, he said, a 7-foot wolf-looking man, a rougarou. And he said, in his fright, he jumped so high he landed on the kitchen table, standing up. And he said it didn't look like the rougarou was being aggressive to hurt him, but was like trying to tell him something. And he got close, and the little boy swung with the knife and cut said rougarou in the arm, turned around, and was gone. Parents came in, seen the damage, told them everything. Uh, in a community where this is you raised around these stories, I'm quite sure the parents had said, something else happened here. What y'all was doing? No. And 2 days later, he had his little fishing pole going to the pier and was going to do some fishing. His uncle's shrimp boat had came back in, and his uncle was cleaning up the decks and stuff like that. And on his left arm, forearm, was a bandage. And that's where he'd slid it with the blade. So a family member or somebody that you love had to do that to break the spell, and it broke the spell on him. Now, don't know why they put that spell on him for what he did, so egregious to the community. But in the Native American Indians in the bayous and the swamps, they still run by their old rules. If you do something enough to bring embarrassment to yourself and to the community, it's like being I can't remember the name of the people that ride horse and buggy and stuff. So anyway, they can't, they'll shun you and make you leave the community, and you can't go to another tribe and their community and move in with them because you've been shunned. Okay? So a lot of times, that's the worst thing that can happen to them is to be shunned. I think they would take death over being shunned from your community and your family and your loved ones. So there's those stories that go around. There's also stories of New Orleans. Even in New Orleans, I point this out to people that never been here before, and you'll be walking downtown the court and stuff, and the realtors will have signs for apartment for sale, apartment for lease, and underneath it, some of them would have they'll have not haunted, and everybody thought, oh, that's tourists, that's a joke, they came up with something. No, because by real estate laws, the realtor has to disclose what problems they had in the house. Um, so if there was like poltergeist activity, uh, ghost, if a murder took place in the house, and I think even if somebody just passed away from the house from natural causes, by law they have to tell the new buyer this. They don't tell the new buyer this, then the house recedes straight to the buyer. Whatever money they still owed on it was null and void, and the realtor would lose their license. So under lease buildings and rentals here, they will be not haunted. Uh, and then a few more not haunted, but there's 2 or 3 apartments I know of in the quarter that actually has a little wooden thing swinging underneath it, haunted. So I guess the realtors don't want to take a chance of what is and what ain't, because if they don't disclose all the information to the new buyer, they're left out in the open. By law, they should have said that. They should have disclosed it. That makes the contract null and void on the realtor's end. Everything reverts back to the new homeowners, and it's up to them to decide what they're going to do with the house, keep it or resell it. But the rental agent, either independent or with a company, loses, because by federal law, you got to disclose these things. And it's always like that. It's always like that. I've been in the quarter many times at night, and you be off a side street from Bourbon Street, because Bourbon Street don't never close down, so you always see a free show there. And you would catch out the corner of your eye of a figure standing in the dark, but not in the dark, if that makes sense. And when you glance back over, it's gone. There's no way they could have got from where I seen it and walked away either way, and I wouldn't have seen them. There's also a story of they was looking for an armed robber who pulled an armed robbery at a convenience store at night, and the units went in and saturated areas. They had a good description of the man. A bunch of units stayed in their cars. A bunch got on foot. They had canine out there. And one of the officers said he walked by a church. And years ago, the churches used to leave the main doors open, unlocked, so anybody could go in, light a candle, and pray if they needed to. These days, they lock it up tight in Fort Knox, but a few years back, the doors would be open. So he walked to the church, opened the door, and it's a nice sized church. I know the church. Went through the vestibule where, you walk in, they got this vestibule, and then the main wall with the doors leading into the church or the cathedral. And they had candles lit up and stuff, and the vestibule and stuff. A few lights, small lights on inside the church. It wasn't like totally dark, but you couldn't see clearly things that were that far away from you. And he said he walked in, made about 10 steps, 15 steps in, and froze in his tracks. He said this feeling came over him of dread, like somebody had just poured liquid nitrogen on him. Said that he knew the weapon he had on the side wasn't going to help him. It just never felt a feeling like that. He said before in his life, and then after, never felt a feeling like that. It was more like something telling him you don't belong here. And when I heard the story, and other people heard the story, we believed him, and it wasn't the person that we was looking for the armed robbery, because he had been caught 3 blocks over. So it wasn't him. But he said he'd never seen what it was, but this dread came over him, fear, cold, and he just backed out. And to this day, he doesn't go in a block vicinity of that church. And so it is known that a lot of churches wasn't built on hallowed ground, so to speak. So basically anything could walk into a church, even if it's on hallowed ground. I don't really know if that stops entities or spirits, ghosts, whatever you want to call them. But there's a lot of weird things that go on in this city. I'm going to delve into the books and come back with some more stories. Just like the Julia Brown incident, where the Voodoo Mambo was in a community, helped raise the kids, or people would go to her for spiritual advice and guidance. And when she fell ill, they said, as the story goes, the whole community went to her house, and one by one, or one by two, a husband and wife, or just a wife, they would file in and wish her best wishes and energy and stuff like that. 24 hours later, a had to be about a category 4 or 5 hurricane slammed into that area. And that was back in the days before radar, satellites. So by the time you realized a storm was coming, it was already on you. Uh, it's, it takes a while to get to where it's going, but you know. So, and said storm was rapidly upon them. And he said, Julia Brown, before it took her last breath, cursed the entire town. And storm came and wiped out that town, that little village in Manchac Bayous. Uh, so it's a conflicting story uh, of the townspeople coming in and wishing her well and blessings, to her sitting up in her last breath cursing the town. Uh, so you kind of got to play it by ear for yourself, because let's face it, there wasn't that many people survived from the community from that storm. A lot of them drowned and things like that from storm surges. And whoever survived the hurricane, they're long gone now because of age. And her coffin is built on a small island in the bayou. Uh, her and 3 or 4 other bodies. And, the wrought iron fence is, you know, bent over and stuff like that. And I've been there a couple of times, and it looks like nobody really takes care of it. But I'm not really sure if that's a grave or not. So it goes back. Is it just urban legend that the community did go in and wish her well, or she cursed the town because no such thing happened with the town folks, and because what she practiced, they uh, still allowed her to live in the community. More or less like people say, I don't want you, but I have to tolerate you. So, don't know about that story either. Uh, but I do know the hurricane hit that part of Manchac Bayou, destroyed the town. They was get bodies out of the water. They would nail boards together and put ropes, and they'd go out in their boat and lay the bodies on there. Who didn't get drowned was killed by falling debris, and the other ones, the people that survived, basically, I guess, rebuilt the little community back up. So I just wanted to touch bases on those things. It's been a while since we had a story time, and I'm going to look into more things and get as much information I got about it. I think the next one will be like this, 2 or 3 different things, but it'll start off with the Axeman in New Orleans, because that's some weird shit in itself. So I'll come back with those. I'll get as much information I could, like I had from this, because a lot of information is just passed down. Uh, a lot of it may have been documented, but you don't know if the documentation is right or anything like that, because the time frame it took place in. So we'll get back to also, like I used to do in the old days, story times, and see what we can bring out. If any of the subscribers would like me to look into something and give information on it on another video, just text it below in the comments. I'll see what I can do. And as always, I would like for y'all to hit the subscribe button and the like button. It helps the analytics for YouTube, So I'd appreciate that. And as always, like, share, and subscribe.